Hey guys, I'm Branskipants and welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, what's up? The other day I was scrolling through TikTok, and in between my thirst traps of guys in the scream mask and the tarot card readers that like to tell me that a love offer is coming my way, I stumbled on this TikTok of this girl talking about a small business in Salem, Massachusetts called Cat's Creepy Creations, and she was getting raided by the FBI for having human remains.
Breaking potential true crime news, anyone? Right out of Salem, FBI is looking for body parts in relation to this artist. Anyway, here's their Instagram, not suspicious at all.
Is there a literal modern body snatching ring black market thing happening in Salem? Because this bone drama I just posted about goes way deeper than I realized. Yeah, let me just refresher. Here's the news article I posted. Cat's Creepy Creations is being investigated by the FBI. And that investigation is for illegal human remains. This is from their own Instagram. Are you in the market for a real human skull? Oh, and I have a plot twist for you. But first, okay, so allegedly, Cat is associated with Jeremy Pauley, who was already arrested. Pause to read. Again, pause to read, but reselling stolen body parts. Sounds like body snatching to me. Anyway, remember when literally 2 weeks ago I made a video when I was at a thrift store in Salem and I said I feel really weird about these human remains. Like, is this ethical? They're her human remains that she sells that are being investigated. Like, not the literal FBI investigating the human remains that I just posted about. There it is, Cat's Creepy Creations. These are all... Who's to say those remains are not a part of this investigation? And like, benefit of the doubt, maybe Cat did not know that the remains that were being sold were illegal or whatever, but the FBI is investigating for a reason, and yeah, that's like a doozy.
So naturally, I had to Google it. The only details that I could really find was that Cat's Creepy Creations, she has an Instagram. She does like art modification, like doll modification. She like takes dolls and makes them kind of creepy and morbid. And she uses bones in her art and sells bones, which is legal. It's not legal in Louisiana. You're only allowed to be in possession of teeth, gallstones, fingernails, and human cremated remains. That's it. And then in Tennessee and Georgia, you're allowed to have human remains, but you cannot import or export them. You have to get them there and you have to leave them there if you ever decide to leave the state. So if you don't live in those states, you can pretty much do whatever with human body remains. And it's kind of a free-for-all. And it's kind of been a free-for-all for a long time. Anyways, the FBI, they went there. They went to her house. They spent like 8 hours there and at her business, taking possessions out. And people were kind of freaked out. You know, they're like, oh my God, is she a murderer? And the FBI said that they could not reveal anything because of the investigation, but they could assure people that safety was not a concern. So to me, it kind of sounds like something's going up with her inventory. You know, there's some suspicions around the bones, and so they removed them. But the TikToker that posted the videos that we looked at, her name is Creepy Caitlin. And she originally had posted a video where she was in a store and there were bones for sale. And she was really just kind of talking about the ethics and morality of selling bones, like how it can be a possession and is it okay and where these bones come from. And then, like a week or two later, that same vendor was being raided. So she was talking about like body snatching and, you know, kind of accusing the people of doing some shady stuff, which I don't think it's that black and white. Creepy Caitlin posted on Reddit that in her DMs on TikTok, people are messaging her, and someone from the oddity community was saying that there is like a bigger thing happening behind the scenes, like much more going on, and that allegedly Cat's Creepy Creations is connected to a man named Jeremy Pauley. Now, Jeremy Pauley works in the oddity world. He does art with like blood. I think he works for an oddity museum, and he buys oddity items like bones and things, and he sells them on Facebook which is definitely against their terms and of agreement or whatever. And he got arrested in June of 2022 because he allegedly bought stolen body parts from an individual in Arkansas who works in a mortuary who had sold stolen donated items from a university. From my understanding, they were finished with the items and sent them to the mortuary to be cremated, but instead of being cremated, they were swiped and sold for like $4,000. Jeremy Pauley, I don't think, has been convicted of anything. He got out on bond, bail, whatever it's called, and he was supposed to go to trial in November, and then it got postponed to January, and then I can't find anything else about it. I don't know if the trial happened or if it got postponed again, but he is still currently out, and he is still selling bones on Facebook. And I found a news article from Newsweek in 2020 that kind of highlights how body parts such as bones, skulls, but specifically children's bones were being sold in like private Facebook groups, which definitely goes against terms of service. And we're going to come back full circle at like the whole social media and selling of body parts. But first, I would like to kind of look at the history of the obsession with people buying body parts. So basically, people started really collecting oddity items back in the Victorian days. And they had like these wooden cabinets that they would put medical and botanical items in. So you'd have like plants, you'd have medical equipment, you would have bones, you would have taxidermy things and pictures of dead people, just weird stuff. And it was meant to be like a focal point of the room. You know, the bigger the collection, the more impressive. You were wealthy and you were knowledgeable. So it was a conversation starter, a focal point, and a way for you to kind of show off. The wooden cabinets were called Wunderkammer. I probably didn't say that right, but it basically was German that meant cabinet of curiosity. And even though that started so long ago, the fascination with owning rare and medical items still is a big deal today to some people. So I think the biggest question here is, where do these bones come from? And that is a very valid question. Well, I started to do some digging, and it seems like the start of this obsession for body parts would, as one would assume, would be within the medical community. Cadavers have and still are a very important part of medicine. This is how medical students practice surgeries, identify diseases, and just practice working on patients without causing any pain to a real patient. The original practice of dissecting cadavers goes all the way back to the 3rd century of Alexandria in Egypt. I'm probably going to say their names wrong, but Herophilius and Aristratus were the first physicians to kind of look past the religious reasons and start to dissect bodies, because like it was really taboo. So they didn't really get much flack because, one, they used dead criminals. No one really cared about them. And two, Alexandria was really trying to be like the center hub of like science and education. So they kind of just let them do what they wanted because they were getting good results. So after Herophilius and Aristratus died, the practice kind of stopped. It was believed that there was like a rival school that kind of possibly was like, there's really no need to dissect them. And then as time went on, the Roman Empire was like, that's blasphemous. Like, we're not going to cut open people. So the practice stopped until like 1,000 years later. So in the year 1315, at the University of Bologna, they finally dissect another body. Medical students were needing to observe like the process of cutting open a body, and they weren't even really getting hands-on, but they needed to know what was going on, so they would do like a public dissection in front of all of the med students. It was becoming required that they watch these dissections. And then of course you had people that wanted to watch because morbid curiosity. And then as this is picking up, we have other universities opening up around in Europe, and they are starting to also perform public dissections. So now, with more universities starting to dissect bodies for medical school, we have this new demand for bodies without really a way to supply them. So Great Britain came up with the Murder Act of 1752, which basically was saying, like, hey, if you murder someone, you're going to be put to death. And as extra punishment, your body is going to get dissected for medical school, because it was not considered like a noble act. It was more like a humiliation on top of it. Like, not only are you going to die, but you're going to get chopped up. And that's what we're going to do with you. It also called for gibbeting, which, if you don't know what that is, basically if you get executed, they would put your body like on display, like in a cage or something, kind of like as a deterrent, like if you do this, this is going to happen to you. So, but I think that, judging by the climate of what we're going to learn here, I would say that probably more of these bodies went to be dissected because it was very much needed in the medical world. So even though this law was passed, there still was not enough bodies to supply cadavers for the medical community. So people had to start taking it into their own hand. Medical students were kind of encouraged to get their own bodies. They didn't really tell them how, but it was known that you would just go get a body out of the cemetery. And you also had people called resurrectionists, and they would go dig up the bodies, take them on over to the medical school, get some money, give them the cadaver, and then they would get to work. And it became a really big deal. Like, people would have to stand guard and put cages like over the graves of their loved ones because you were going to get body snatched. It was just inevitable. Okay, so it essentially became a free-for-all, to the point to where there was a duo named William Burke and William Hare who went around Edinburgh, Scotland in the span of 10 months and killed like 16 people. And they killed them, delivered them to the medical students, and they dissected them, and they got paid. Eventually they got caught, and then I guess the people that were prosecuting them like talked to Hare and was like, yo, if you help us get Burke, you can have immunity and we'll pin it all on him. So he was like, sure, great. And so Burke got found guilty of murder and they executed him. His body got dissected, of course, and then his skeleton got donated to the Anatomical Museum of Edinburgh, Scotland, and it is still on display to this day. So, full circle. Karma got him. So, body snatching was not just like a European thing. It was also happening in the United States as well. It was mainly marginalized people like the Native Americans, the black slaves, and the poor people that were getting body snatched. But that's not to say that, like, if you were wealthy, you were off limits. A congressman named John Scott Harrison, who was the son of the former president, William Henry Harrison, had died, and at the funeral, it was noticed that a friend's grave had been dug up. So John Scott Harrison's son had got a search warrant and went to the hospital looking for the friend that they noticed was gone. And once they got to the hospital, they found their own father, the congressman, hanging on a hook, waiting to be dissected. And of course, because they were wealthy and of like importance, they were able to get the body back and bury it. But they didn't even know that it had been snatched because they had hired a guard to stand post. And it's not known if that guard worked in cahoots with the people, which probably so, but he disappeared and I don't know if they ever found him. But they got the congressman back, and as far as I know, he is still in his grave. But I don't think they ever found the friend, but it was just such a common occurrence. Like, if you died in that time period, if you were lucky enough to be buried, you probably were not going to be still in your grave. And people were getting really upset about it. And we started having people riot because people were mad that the bodies were getting snatched. And in one year, 1788, in New York, it was reported that there was like a medical student that was working on a body, and some people were like looking through the window at it, and they were just like in awe. And the medical student was annoyed, and he like grabbed the hand of the body and was like, "I'm cutting up your mom," which really upset the boys because apparently one of the boys' mother did just pass away. So he went home, told his father. His father went and dug up the grave, and sure enough, there was no body in it. And so they were furious and they started marching towards the hospital, and they like burnt stuff in the streets and took some bodies and reburied them. And apparently the mayor had to like lock the people in, like not the people, but the doctors and the medical students in the jail because that was like the most secure building. And then he had to call reinforcements. Soldiers came, and like apparently the soldiers ended up shooting the crowd because it was getting violent. And then like possibly 20 people died, so more bodies to be cut up. But this like wasn't just a New York thing. There was allegedly like 17 other riots, like all before the Civil War, because people were mad. Like you just kept taking their relatives out of the ground. So since this was becoming such a big deal, certain laws were starting to be passed because of the political climate of cadavers. George Washington signed the Crimes Act of 1790, which basically was saying if you commit a murder, you're going to be executed and dissected. The same thing that, Britain was doing. And many other states started passing things called bone bills, which allowed medical schools to obtain unclaimed bodies that were at hospitals and workhouses and poorhouses. So if nobody claimed this body, they were allowed to take it and do with it what they wanted. And also in Great Britain, they had done something very similar. They had the Anatomy Act of 1832, which basically, same thing, if we have unclaimed bodies in hospitals, prisons, workhouses, you can have them to do your dissecting, the medical school, but they also allowed the option for people to donate bodies to the medical school to cover burial costs because a lot of poor people couldn't really afford to bury people. So we're now in the 1800s, and basically it's required for medical students to have their own cadavers, and people that were studying dentistry were also needing skulls so they could like practice on doing injections. And everybody needed skulls and bones. Like it was just really needed. If you were in the medical field, you needed your own body to work on. And even though Parliament had been passing these laws, there still was not a lot of bones to go around, especially with students in osteology that were trying to learn about bones. So Great Britain decided that they were going to outsource to the colonies, specifically India. Indian people that were working in the crematories were asked to provide the skeletons to the medical schools in Europe. And it was reported that in like 1850, Calcutta, the medical school had processed like 900 skeletons a year. Okay, so India was essentially like the biggest provider of bones all the way up until 1985, when the India Supreme Court enacted the National Import and Export Control Act and like ceased bones exportation completely. The ban was put into place when basically all of the graveyards had been depleted, but most importantly, somebody who was exporting skeletons was discovered, and they had like 1,500 children bones. And children skeletons are much more valuable than adult grown skeletons because they show all the different variations of like how they change, because you're still growing, and they're just a lot more valuable and you can learn a lot more from them. And so when this person had like 15,000 children skeletons, it was really alarming. And it was, like, are these kids being kidnapped and murdered? Because a lot of kids were going missing. So that's when they're like, okay, we need to maybe stop this. So during this adjustment period after this ban, a lot of schools were having to like provide class sets of bones for medical students to look at. But it should be noted that Wired wrote an article in 2008 where they did some investigative reporting and discovered that up until 2001, a company known as the Young Brothers allegedly continued to export human bones from India. The facility was raided, and the owner, Vanish Iran spent 2 days in jail and was released due to political ties. At the time of the writing the article, it was said that the young brothers still advertised that they sold bones, but in India only. But a Canadian company called Osta International, who supplied bones to the U.S., claimed that they got their bones from a middleman in Singapore who got them from India. And even today, the pharmaceutical world and medicinal world and private research sectors, like, they want cadavers, and there's money to be made. If you are a poor family and you have a deceased loved one, a lot of funeral homes will offer to just cremate a little portion of the body for you if you give them the rest of the body to be donated. And a lot of people will take it because they're in a very vulnerable situation. But then what happens to that body? Well, that's where body brokers come in. So the funeral home will take the body, and then a business called a body broker will come and buy the body off of the funeral home, and then they will sell it for big bucks. And a body broker basically deals with non-transplant tissue. So if you are an organ donor, that is a much highly regulated thing because these organs are going to people that need them, and they keep tabs on that. But if you are a body broker, you are non-transplant, and you are just getting bodies, and you are anyone that'll buy them, you will give them to them. So whatever they want to do with it, research, whatever, you got it. And you can even lease the body, and they'll send it back to you, and then you can lease it to someone else and get more bang for your buck. And that's what a lot of them do. Okay, so we know that there is money to be made here. And so I was curious to know, how much a body's worth. So let's go ahead and cover some of the prices. Some of these prices are from different times. It's not like you can just go Google, how much does it cost to buy this? It's all a little everywhere. But I was able to find some data from a few news articles, which, by the way, I'm going to have a lot of articles linked below. So if you want to go do some reading and go down a rabbit hole, I got you covered. But let's go ahead and look at the prices. So from an article written in the Hindustan Times in 2018, it was reported that bone smugglers receive anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 rupees for just a skull, which converts roughly to 121 to 243 American dollars. Then once it gets out of India, the local countries, the smugglers can get anywhere from 40,000 to 50,000 rupees, which converts to 486 to 607 American dollars. And then The Wired shared a nice graph from 2007 showing the prices of each bone when the U.S. schools are purchasing the bones. And at the time, an articulated skeleton with wires inside of it would be $3,193. And then an article written by Reuters Investigates took an average of 7 body brokers and calculated a full cadaver could be anywhere from around $5,000. And then other body parts, which I thought was interesting, we're looking at a brain is $750. Cervical spine is $300. A foot is $200. A forearm with the hands and elbow is $250. A hand is $250. A head is $500. A knee is $450. A leg is $1,300. A shoulder with a collarbone is $400. An empty torso is $2,000. And then an intact torso with all of the organs inside is $2,100. So these numbers are strictly for legal body brokers. As far as the black market goes, your prices could really vary depending on what it is. These organs that were really of no good for transplants, but maybe for someone who's a collector that wants to put them in a jar and stick them on a shelf, she was able to get $4,000 for.
Hi, Editing Brandy here. I just realized that I'm just casually mentioning she and selling organs like you know who I'm talking about. I'm referring to the woman in Arkansas who stole organs that were supposed to be cremated. The one that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So I just want to specify. Okay, bye.
And who knows what else this person has sold. But then you have instances where you might get kidnapped and get your kidney taken out because maybe somebody needs a kidney and they need a transplant. There's a lot of scary areas in this black market of where, you could get killed because they need something, or you might just be sold to research. Because also, I think it's important to note that a lot of these cadavers do not have documentation. So it would be very easy to just kill someone and sell the body to science, just like they did in the 1700s. So I want to circle back to that woman in Arkansas who sold the bucket of remains for $4,000. That's not the only time that's happened. Like, there has been people that have been arrested for taking donated body parts and selling them as well. In 2008, a man named Henry Reed, who was in charge of the cadaver program at UCLA, by the time he served in that position, he had made about $1 million by selling donated remains to pharmaceutical companies and medical research. So usually these people get caught because these are like donated items, and I guess it gets noticed. And then once it gets noticed, then they get in trouble. And the only reason they're getting in trouble is because they're taking donated remains. Like, there really is no regulation on this, but, you know, they don't want you killing people, and they don't want you stealing bodies that are meant to be donated to other entities. And then this whole black market aspect, even though there's like a creepy, gritty dark market, you know, where like you can sell body parts and maybe do some icky stuff, there's like a kind of open black market on like Facebook and Instagram between collectors, like bones specifically. Even though like Facebook, who also owns Instagram, is against their terms of service to sell human remains, the way that the loophole is a lot of people that collect them, or they have a large following, they may just kind of like post a picture and be like, DM me, you know, for a price. So they're not like blatantly selling it, but it's heavily implied, and all you have to do is just inquire, send a message, and then pay them, and then get it shipped to you. So it's still happening, but it does cause a lot of backlash, and people's accounts get taken down and they get reported. But yeah, that Jeremy Pauly guy that got arrested for buying stolen body parts, yeah, he's actually working on an app called, you guessed it, Wunderkammer. I still can't say it. But basically, he's making an app that is a platform for people in the oddity community. It's a kind of like social network, and sell items and buy items without there being issues with the platforms. And, you know, that's cool that you made a solution to your problem, but seeing how this particular man was just involved in a scandal where he bought stolen remains, it seems like that it could maybe cause some new problems, and maybe like a platform that he probably isn't intending to be used in a bad way, that possibly could be used in a bad way if you can just blatantly sell body parts. So that's kind of questionable that that's happening. So yeah, if people are wanting to use this app to buy body parts to collect, it's just important to note that there's always going to be bad actors who take things a little too far, and that is a concern with this app being put out. Yeah, so before we go, I just kind of wanted to point out that I started out talking about Kat's creepy creations. I don't necessarily think that she's guilty of anything, except probably she unluckily got her hands on some merchandise that were possibly stolen, I would assume. Because as we can tell from what we've learned, authorities don't really get involved with this whole body parts thing because it's not really regulated unless there's some type of foul play like murder or stolen goods. So I would say that that's probably what's going down with that investigation. I think it's probably going to be tied to that person in Arkansas who is selling stolen body parts. So yeah, this has been really eye-opening for me. Whenever I thought of human trafficking, I always just kind of thought of people being enslaved or like, you know, sex work, things like that. I never actually considered that people are being human trafficked to be like killed for body parts. And now I have like a new fear unlocked. So that's great. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up to please the algorithm gods. I would greatly appreciate it. And maybe consider subscribing. That'd be really cool. And I'll catch you next time. Peace.